To start off, how are you and how have you been feeling in the lead up to Sophie?
Oh, wow. I'm okay, thank you. Yeah, a lot of emotions. Definitely felt overwhelmed at times. It's been quite a crazy few years. All the emotion, that went into finishing the album. There's been a lot, but this album is it's very much a community that Sophie brought together. It is like a family, like as you can see that it's very collaborative, this album. There's features on pretty much every song. But they're not just features, they're all friends, they're all close friends of Sophie's. She loved working with friends. And sometimes it started as work and they became friends, but all the people on this record were very close with Sophie. So that's helped. I think, we've all kind of helped each other and it's felt like a team kind of working on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you felt supported throughout this entire process from start to finish?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally supported. I mean, the family for one thing, our family, and then also, yeah, all of these amazing collaborators and guests, absolutely supported. I mean, it's worth saying that when I started this album, so when I started working on this album alone, yeah, Sophie and I had already been working on the album for about 3 or 4 years. So it had already been fully conceptualized, the track list, the song, the pacing of it and how she wanted it to unfold and the notes she wanted it to hit. All of these things, I think we discussed a lot. So I feel like it was when it came to finishing it without her, I feel like she was always kind of there with me, talking me through it and guiding me. And I had all the memories of what we discussed with this record, but also finishing the last album together. We did, all of the mixing and mastering for Oil together. So I felt like she was there with me, guiding.
In 2021, you said that there were hundreds of tracks in
Hmm.
the vaults, some early ideas, some rough sketches, and then other fully realized tracks. Is this album kind of the latter of that vault?
When I said that about the tracks in the vault, I wasn't really including this as part of that. I was sort of
Oh,
considering this was already a project that was like happening, and that I didn't consider that like vault unreleased future releases or whatever. So when you ask about like were these songs more in the completed stage or were they more rough demos, I would say these were really very much finished. There were a few that were more sketches of ideas, but the ones that were like that, as I say, we'd gone into them quite a lot. We'd discussed a lot. Like Sophie would be like, well, this one, I want it to be in the world of this other song, just say, and but the bass has to hit more like bass shopping or whatever, so there would be clear references from either songs of hers or songs that we loved growing up or songs that we listen to now, whatever. So we knew where it was going, the direction it was headed.
what were some of the references of the songs that you loved growing up together?
Yeah, it's interesting to think about because we always spoke about these things, and I think there was some nods to some of these things in the last record that weren't perhaps picked up on so much. We loved Orbital growing up, the electronic music duo, and of course Autechre that Sophie's spoken at length about. So the last album, the uninsides bit of the title was sort of a combination of Untilted, which was Sophie's favorite Autechre album, and Insides, which was our favorite Orbital album. So there was things like that, always referencing, Moby, Everything Is Wrong, which was a huge influence on the album itself was an influence, but also the remix album to Everything Is Wrong was like pretty much the direct influence to Sophie's remix album in the way that she did pretty much all the remixes herself. But it's any kind of references. It would be like an obscure funk track from the 80s. She'd be like, I want the bass to be like, Skip to My Lou by Finnis Henderson, or I don't know, something by the Mary Jane Girls, or like, some obscure 80s stuff. She loved Leroy Burgess. So there would be this kind of language that we'd developed of like trance tracks, happy hardcore stuff from the 90s, all these things that, and she could just say one word, or I could say one word, and she'd know exactly what it was. So those were things that she loved. She loved talking about, and we also used to work a lot in our family home where we grew up, and we'd have, so Sophie would set up the studio there, and we'd have behind us the racks of CDs that we grew up with. So it would be very easy to sort of like pick them out and even like get inspiration from some of the artworks and the covers and those kind of things.
Yeah, I feel like you had a library of references behind you, but also just up here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely, totally. I mean, music was Sophie's, was Sophie's passion. I mean, she absolutely, my whole life, as long as I can remember, from 5 years old, 6 years old, it was all music, electronic music. And we were lucky that my dad took us to festivals growing up, and we went to and we saw some of these acts as they were just kind of emerging: the Prodigy, Moby, Orbital, Chemical Brothers, Pet Shop Boys, all of these people that were really formative.
Tell me about that rave culture that you and Sophie shared together, because it sounds like your dad was in on that as well.
Totally, yeah. My dad started to take us to festivals as early as '96. I would have been 8, and
8 years old.
Yeah. And we were lucky because it was my half brother who'd introduced him to it, who was at university at the time, and we would go, the four of us, to these raves and festivals, and I can just picture Sophie there, just slack-jawed, just taking it all in. And she obviously really was taking it all in, because 20 years later, she's telling me in the studio, I want to now do something like, remember that time when we saw the Prodigy in '97 or whatever it might be?
So you mentioned earlier about the team of collaborators that were around you and Sophie, and I feel like this record really is a reflection of that. You've got the PC Music crew, of course, different people from that, BB Borelli, Hannah Diamond, Cecile Believe, who was the primary vocalist on Sophie's first record. What is it like having this final product, which is the fabric of Sophie's story and really her impact as well with these collaborators?
It's special, and it means a lot. And a lot of the lyrics, I think, speak to these collaborators and their connection with Sophie. I think there's some really special, touching songs on there. Always and Forever with Hannah Diamond, and My Forever with Cecile, Love Me Off Earth, Exhilarate. That, the last section's very it is kind of emotional, kind of celestial feeling to that final section.
As I was listening through, I think the run of tracks with BC Kingdom, I literally wrote, the pop girlies are going to love this one.
Yeah, I'm really happy that you enjoyed that. That Sophie referred to it as the joy section.
Oh,
that was the joy section, and she saw this album in 4 parts. So there was the first section is kind of the first 4 songs, so up to Reason Why. So it's the intro, Raw, Plunging Asymptote, and the Dome's Protection, those 4, and it's kind of a bit more, I guess, ambient, some of it, and mood building. It's a bit sparse, and then it's that she wanted like a real explosion of joy, and that's what I think BC Kingdom meant to her. That's how she saw them, and their music, and the music that they made with Sophie. So that was like, right, we're doing it this way. We're going to have the joy section. It's going to be 3 songs, all the ones with BC Kingdom back to back, and then from there it was the techno section, which is kind of non-stop. It's it's very much kind of arranged live in the studio. That one, it has the feel of a live show or a club night where Sophie's playing, something like that. It was very much based around the live shows that she was doing at that time. Yeah, that's big party stuff, and then there's that celestial kind of pop sounding stuff at the end.
Totally. And I think as well, there's this real propulsion throughout the record, but I think also there's those reminders, those kind of almost spoken word, robotic reminders of staying present, you're safe. It feels like we're really being almost enveloped in this record in a way. At least that's how I felt. There was almost like a meditative quality to it.
Totally. There is that. Yeah, totally. It should feel like that. Certainly those parts. I think the whole record actually, but I'm thinking of the Dome's Protection in particular, that it really does have that kind of warming feel to it. And I know some of the lyrics, always, always and forever, my forever, love me off earth. I know some people have said, well, were these lyrics written after we lost Sophie? But they weren't, they were all things that Sophie had worked on and written. I think, some of those songs were made during COVID. There's a sort of distance, or there's a hope, or there's something lyrically there that I think we were all thinking about our mortality a little bit anyway at that time with COVID and the distancing and everything, and people not being able to see each other and friends connecting. I think these things. So I think that's perhaps why I know some people have thought the lyrics are a little. Well, it just sounds as if like, they were written after Sophie had gone, given some of the content almost, like
Yeah.
it was, yeah, but it wasn't the case. These were all things that Sophie had worked on and written with the other vocalists.
Yeah. Sophie really admired risk takers. What kind of risks do you think Sophie has taken on this record?
Quite a lot, as always. Like, I don't know. There's so much on it. It's just things like, having a really pounding, filthy techno track called Elegance. I mean, that's quite a Sophie move. Yeah, I mean, that song in particular, the tempo changes and that kind of funk, the way it kind of changes into like a funk track it is incredible. I mean, it's very ambitious. Well, I mean, I think to anyone else, they would hear it and say, well, that's really interesting, creative, ambitious, whatever word they want to use. But I guess for me, we've become used to it with Sophie, everything was like risk taking, like you say. It was all about. It was just. I don't think she considered it risk taking. It was just being her. But to anyone else, it seems like, wow, how do you think of that? I've been bowled over so many times. Like, yeah, some of those times just walking to the studio, being like, damn, this is crazy. Like, yeah, this is like, and so now nothing would surprise me in that, that she could create. It's but yeah, I think what's interesting is the process changed a little bit between the last album and this one. I think it was like, as opposed to seeing it as, making up a song of loads of different instruments and each instrument on a different track, she kind of thought of the software that she was working in as the instrument. So she's kind of like being able to do anything with it and take songs in any direction, or remixes or extended versions. It was kind of about blurring the lines of what all those processes are and what is a album, and and in the end we end up with what feels like an album in this instance. But I mean, in terms of her live shows and just the way she was recording stuff, and all of it became, it was a very new way of working the last few years, and it was very exciting. And I think it left us with a lot of great, because of working in this way, she left us with a lot of incredible music. It's we're lucky, really. We're lucky that she did it.
So lucky. Is there any kind of unique instrumentation or sounds that we should keep an ear out for on this record?
This album, it's almost entirely synthesized by Sophie from original stuff. I mean, the vocals obviously are recorded live, and there's some dogs barking in the intro. Those are not synthesized. Those were recorded. But everything else on the album is synthesized by Sophie, and synthesized and not even samples. It's all Sophie synthesis. There should be amazing sounds happening all the time, hopefully.
You were Sophie's trusted soundboard for over 10 years. Was there anyone in particular that you leaned on for advice in that final mixing stage, in that mastering?
Yeah, absolutely. For this record, I actually worked with a mixing engineer. Alex Evans is an incredible mixer. He's in London, and we worked together for 6 months or so on it. I think doing it alone, having always worked alongside Sophie, I definitely needed someone there. And I think Alex Evans was the perfect person. He was someone who A.G. Cook had worked with and recommended. And so it was just, I met him, and it worked straight away. He was great, totally got the music, and we had a good connection. And yeah, I really speak very highly of him. And I needed definitely wanted a little bit of support with it, for sure.
Absolutely.
And also throughout the process, AG came in, and Keane, Easyfun, and Charli came and listened, and a lot of PC music and other collaborators and of course the artists who feature on this album would come and listen to their songs and others. So yeah, I think I needed that. I had a lot of support and a lot of people to play songs to and get their thoughts. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How do you know when a record like this one is finished? When you're ready to send it off, it's done.
I don't know that you ever do. I don't know that you can ever know for sure. What what made me feel that this one was finished or as good as finished? I think I got a lot of the same feelings as we had with the last album with Oil. You know, where we were also like, oh, is it finished? You know, you don't really know, and then one day you just play it and you're like, that's it. That was very similar. It felt very similar, that process in both Oil and Sophie. And that made me think, okay, yeah, this is how it happened last time. Like I remember we went into you know, this is months and months into the process of Oil, of finishing Oil. We went into the studio and we were going to have one final day, you know, in a nice studio, and we were going to listen to everything. And Sophie was like, okay, you know, we'd been working for ages on it. So we had already done so many versions of every song, but Sophie was like, okay, let's play the full thing as we have it now. And we prepared like all the versions, you know, I just had just to hand all the previous versions, so we could, you know, in theory, bring things in and say, okay, we need to bring in maybe the vocals better on that version of this song and whatever, the arrangement from this version, all these things. And we played the album through and Sophie's like, forget it. This is it. This is it. We don't need to change anything. Don't need to hear any of those versions. And it felt a little bit like that with this one. It was like, yeah, when it came to the end, and it just suddenly just felt right, I think, just listening to it through.
Well, Benny, we are so lucky to have this record, but thank you so much, and to your family for letting us have it. You know, I can't imagine what those conversations were like, and having to dig back into those archives and do that kind of reflection and remembering. But we're so lucky to have this and have this piece of Sophie, you know, this posthumous record. So I wanted to say thank you to you and your family so much for gifting it to the world too, and letting us have this piece of Sophie too.
Of course, of course. I think it's what Sophie would want, and that's what matters.